Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Richard Pluim. I am a member of the Southern California Shakespeare Guild Festival. Hello, Rob. What's up? We're going to bring on Stephanie Courtney in a moment here. She is the director of an upcoming online performance we'll be broadcasting out on January 17th called Are Our Souls Our Own? An exploration of Shakespeare's women. So we'll give just a minute for her to arrive and for others to come on and check in. Stephanie, here she is, requesting to join. So let's bring her on. We're going to talk a little bit about the show and what to expect, and then at the end we'll tell you how to find the links for the show. So let's get her on here.
Hi.
Hello, Stephanie.
How are you?
I'm well. How are you? It's so nice to finally get to speak with you.
Yes, the same here.
Yes, for the viewers, we've been coordinating this talk a little bit and talking about the show, and we're very excited to broadcast it out to you guys in innovative ways on January 17th. But Stephanie, let's dive right in. So you're in Ireland currently.
I am. I live in Dublin. I sort of live between Dublin and New York right now, but I've lived in Dublin for the last 13 years.
Oh, nice. Well, Happy New Year to Dublin.
Thank you. You too? How are you guys doing out there? I've been up all night watching everything sort of disintegrate.
Yes. It's a big wow time.
Yeah, it is.
So tell me about Are Our Souls Our Own? How did the title come about, and how did this project kind of arrive to where it is today?
It just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? It's so easy to say, Are Our Souls Our Own? I'm going to do voice and speech work with that one.
It is. It is a great vowel one. I think I'm going to use it too. Are Our Souls Our Own? Yes.
Actually earlier today I was trying to remember whether or not Linda and I talked about this before COVID happened, and I couldn't remember, and I just couldn't remember, but I knew it was going to be something that was online because I'm here and she's there and all of that. And we were actually working on the Henry V that the company did over the summer.
Past summer, yeah.
Yeah, that I actually wasn't able to go through to completion, but we were reading through the play the first day, and there's the line that Henry V has when he's pretending to be a soldier in the field just before the Battle of Agincourt, and the line is every subject's duty is the king's, but every subject's soul is his own. And they're talking about it in terms of, if you die on the battlefield, does the death fall to the king? Is that his responsibility, or are the faults of the person, do they take them with, when they ascend to heaven and all of that? Are your sins your own? And I went, oh, that's really interesting. I wonder if that's true for the female characters, because the female characters, because there's so much duty involved in what in the lives of female characters, and the whole worlds of plays revolve around that. I mean, if you look at Othello, the breach in the play is not Othello. The breach in the play is that Desdemona has to fight her father. That's the entire play. And so she has to die, whether it's by Othello's hand, whether it's by Iago's hand. There isn't a way that Shakespeare could have written an Elizabethan play where a woman defies her duty and lives, which is a scary thought. So I wonder if that's true for all of the characters. And then when looking at King Lear specifically, each of the daughters follows what they believe is their sense of duty. I mean, even though Cordelia, as the youngest, calls out her sisters as being like these, how can they not know that their duty, they can't love their father once they're, once you're married to your husband. And it's like, do you really think that little of love Cordelia? Cordelia gets a lot of credit that I don't think she deserves, but I'm a middle child and I have a younger brother, so maybe that's where that comes from. The youngest is always special. But
yes.
but the fact that Regan and Goneril say that they love their father all that much is not, that's not dismissing their duty to their husbands. And they do follow through on their duty to their husbands. Each of them follows their duty the way they believe their duty is meant to be followed, and all of them die. So even Cordelia, who we think is the virtuous one in doing all of the right things, she also dies. So is the fault with the women, or is the fault with the world?
Interesting. Okay, so we kind of took this line from Henry V, which is that's one of my favorite speeches, by the way, after he has that encounter with the soldiers. So kind of taking that and going, okay, yeah, how does this apply to women, and just sort of going through the canon and finding some of the key women in Shakespeare and what their story arcs are, and revisiting kind of who is at fault and who has the onus for what ultimately happens. That's fantastic. So now how did you come about finding this wonderful company of women to play these parts, and how did we kind of I guess funnel down all of the speeches and all the characters into the show that we have upcoming?
Actually, Linda and I both sort of said, well, what about this person? What about that person? Let's ask this person. Let's ask that person. But we did have a finite number of slots that we, you know, and the truth of the matter is that there are hundreds of great actresses out there, and nobody's working right now, really. So that was actually a real boon for us, because I know I have a couple of people on this project that I wouldn't otherwise get. If the world was open, they'd be so busy, there'd be no way.
So lucky us.
Yeah, very, very. I'm like, oh, yay. So that was kind of a collaboration on that. And then in terms of the pieces, I also wanted to balance it out where I didn't want this to be just about my agenda. And so I found some pieces and said, well, these are the pieces that I've looked at that sort of fit this. But I really wanted this to be different. And this might get into a little bit of a sexist or feminist kind of conversation, but most women don't get to choose the roles that they play. They are typed based on what they look like and how they fill in a space in a cast or a space in a story. So if I'm a tall, leggy blonde who's absolutely gorgeous, I don't get to choose to play Paulina. I get cast as Helen of Troy, and that's it. I don't get a choice in that. So I wanted the actresses to have a choice. I wanted them to have the ability to be as creative as they wanted to be. So I sort of went, you can be as big and creative, you can choose anything that you want, because it's a question, so it can apply to any character and it can apply to any play. And we'll gear the conversation around the pieces that were chosen, and then like nobody's doing Desdemona. So again, having that conversation, that can still come up in the conversation. She doesn't have to be one of the monologues. But I really wanted to give, and the other thing is that I wanted to give and I found this myself as I was reading through the pieces isolated from their plays. It was like, oh, I had no idea she actually says that. Oh, I had no idea that that's actually her storyline, because we don't ever really follow the female storyline in their whole world. And I went, oh, well, I haven't been doing that as a director. That's a bad thing. I need to rectify quite quickly. But even working like with LA Women Shakespeare, where you're working with an all-female cast, when you're sitting around doing table work, you're still talking about the male characters and the male journey. You're not talking about the female characters and their journey. And Shakespeare has written full female characters with full worlds and full journeys. They just don't take up all that much space in the play itself, but he's written it in there. And that's been kind of a revelation for me, looking at these pieces and doing this work. So I've enjoyed that a lot. and kind of checked myself and went, yeah, you've got to work harder the next time you direct something.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, I love kind of approaching this. It sort of lends itself to the, I guess, the saying, limitation inspires creativity. So by
It
just
does.
taking the speeches and having only that, it allows that text to expand, and then the whole world gets a chance to breathe. And we get to
Yeah.
see all of these nuances and this whole other perspective that we normally wouldn't. That's
Because
fantastic.
because they stand alone, and yeah,
Yes.
so it is. It's been kind of an I didn't expect that when I went into it. It wasn't what I was shooting for. It's just
Mm,
what came up and what was found.
mm, nice. And I also appreciate that you let some of your cast members select their own pieces to explore to kind of open up even further this exploration. You mentioned that no one chose anything from Desdemona, and I admit that sort of surprised me a little bit. I thought, oh wow, okay. Um, are there any other characters or speeches that were not selected that surprised you that you thought for sure someone would want to explore?
Um, Not particularly. I think
Hmm.
no, there wasn't anybody who really who completely stood out. It was interesting to look at the early Henrys and particularly St. Joan. And I thought, oh, it'd
Hmm.
be fascinating to sort of look at St. Joan in
Yes.
Shakespeare and look at Shaw's St. Joan because they're
Oh
such
yeah.
completely different characters. She's a hero
Yeah.
in St. Joan, George Bernard Shaw's St. Joan, but she's not um, in Shakespeare's Henry's, and so
Right.
that was kind of interesting. But no, I mean, I guess the thing is that all of Shakespeare's women are incredibly rich. I just don't think we've given them our due. And there's another side to that too that's a little concerning, which is have our lives been, women's lives in particular, been so narrowly defined these days by media and saying, I mean, it's the idea of pink hats. Why is it that as a protest, as a female protester, I'm assigned a pink hat? That drove me crazy because number one, I hate pink, but that
Hmm.
it's just limiting. And I think we've, even in our political lives, and we've been limited. And what's been interesting that's sort of been coming up as I've been working on this is Shakespeare's women are huge. And in order to
Hmm.
play them, you have to be as huge as they are. And if you're not as huge as they are, you're doing a disservice to their characters. Now, in most of the texts that modern texts that you would get, the women are small, and women actually have to like confine themselves into these narrow definitions of what it means to be a woman and what it means to be feminine.
Hmm.
But in Shakespeare's, it's like, are these roles actually bigger than we know how to be at this point? And that was a
Hmm.
really fascinating revelation was, oh, these women are much bigger and fuller and more powerful, more sure of themselves, even
Hmm.
as they're taking their last breath and going to their deathbed, and how they fight for their children and how they fight for themselves and all of that. And it's like, oh yeah, you don't hear those voices very much anymore. And are we socializing ourselves in real life out of the ability to play these characters? It's like playing the Greek gods, Can we
Hmm.
really do
Yes.
that with any authenticity? I don't like to use the word truth, but can we do it with any authenticity of understanding what it means to be that big, to live in a world of honor, and to go forth with that rather than ego?
Hmm. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I would agree there 100%. I think the ego is kind of the biggest obstacle for an actor approaching one of Shakespeare's characters. That you really, there's nothing that you can really do to I don't know. It's just these characters have been done for 400 years, and they still are done to this day. There's something I think bigger than any one of us, and so it's
Yeah.
about, in large part, of like, okay, well, how can I let go of my immediate self to allow for this huge, larger than life experience to come forth? And I think authentic with authenticity is an absolutely brilliant way.
Yeah.
want to approach this.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, we found ourselves in a nice discussion, and as I understand it, on the 17th, after the show, there will be a sort of talk back. So tell us a little bit about the structure of how this show is going to be.
So the videos are going to be, I'm actually going to make a compilation of them. So there's one compilation that will sort of have a kind of through line. So you can watch them based on what I think my through line should be. But they'll also be up as individual pieces on the Southern California Shakespeare Festival YouTube page.
Okay, cool.
And we're not gonna air the whole thing on the 17th, the day of the talk. I'm gonna pick certain pieces, and we're gonna have discussions around them. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Hollywood Reporter roundtable discussions that they do with directors and producers and actors and all of that. And so I'm modeling the roundtable on that. So we may look at a snippet of Beatrice from Much Ado About Nothing and then say, isn't it interesting that it brings up this? Oh, if I were a man, and then have a discussion around that. And I've structured it enough so that there's structure there, but I'm letting it be as amorphous as it needs to be, because if we get off on a tangent and that just goes, and the women that are involved in this project are, they're just incredible, amazing women that I just want to sit there and listen to them talk about Shakespeare. I mean, I suppose it's a little bit selfish because I love table work, and I love sitting around and talking about text and dramaturgy and character and all of that. And so these are just going to be jumping off points for that conversation. But then the videos will be up, and we will also edit the conversation and put that up as well, so people can see it if they aren't there live. But it'll be probably a truncated kind of thing. But yeah, getting a bunch of women in a space at the same time and saying, and it's interesting. I have a singer-musician friend, Kristen Stokes, who was actually in The Lightning Thief on Broadway last year, and she was telling me about, she was in this rehearsal and it was just women, and it was just female musicians and female singers and all of that, and it changes the room because we don't have to ask for permission. We just speak up. and there is a difference. And especially, I'm not sure that a lot of men understand that when you walk into a rehearsal hall and it's you and 17 men, because that's the cast in Shakespeare. You know, I mean, when I do Shakespeare, I do the full cast. So it's, 3 women and 38 men. And the only thing that balances it is that I'm a female director, but most of the time women walk into theaters, into productions where it's them and 17 men and a male director and a male producer, male designers, and I don't think men quite understand what that is until they walk into a room where it's all women. Because then I think men get the understanding of, oh, I'm in someone else's territory, and it's not as much about privilege as feminism would like it to be. It's, I'm in someone else's territory, and it doesn't matter who you are. When you're in someone else's territory, you don't have the same confidence, freedom, and permission to be who you are. So this is going to be one of those things where we're going to be who we are, good, bad, or indifferent.
Great. Yeah, no, I think this is a wonderful format to sort of get a sneak to see some of the text and then have a discussion around it. It'll give the audience a sort of inside look at the theater process, the kind of beginning. Yeah. And I agree that the table work is very exciting because it's sort of this, taking from an infinite number of possibilities and kind of honing it down into what the show will ultimately become. And so by being able to kind of get a taste of that, and then from that have a sort of lens or a kind of higher level thinking, a way to watch the following pieces later.
It also, for me, I think it explodes the play because everybody comes at it from their own point of view, and at that point everybody can just articulate their own point of view, and that's actually really where the collaboration churns the most. And so I'm often the revelations that I tend to get from other people at the table, because sometimes you don't see the forest for the trees, and somebody will say something that's so unbelievably obvious, and you're like, I've been taking that for granted the whole time. It never even occurred to me to think of it that way. And the whole play just spins, and suddenly you're in a much bigger piece than you ever considered, because you only think in the way that you think. And so when you have 10 people around the table, you have 11 different ways of thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And the play exponentially becomes 11 times 11 pieces bigger. I'm losing my words here, but you understand what I'm saying. So it explodes the whole thing, you know. And that doesn't mean that that's all going to end up on stage, but that's at least going to be in the discussion and how we think about the play.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I would even argue that it is in the stage, even if it's not directly so, and an audience member isn't going to directly go, oh, I hear it like in that verse line, all this stuff. But I think that the full exploration of a rehearsal process and all the contributions do live when the word is spoken. Yeah. So I would say, yeah, it is in there. Okay, I have one more question, and I want to know your answer. I'm taking notes because I don't know how I would answer this. For someone who has never watched a Shakespeare play or has not been exposed to Shakespeare, what is the best sort of prep they can have to get the most out of Our Souls, Our Own?
I would say watch the roundtable discussion and then watch the pieces. The pieces are only 2-3 minutes each, so it's not a whole play. And we've contextualized some of the pieces so they're relevant to us now. We're not doing we're not sort of doing museum theater here where we're in Elizabethan garb or doing Elizabethan anything. So we've contextualized this because Shakespeare's works are completely relevant, absolutely, right now. And so that's what I would say, is start with the discussion, because in the discussion you'll go, oh yeah, or oh god, no, and so you'll start to have a connection to the themes and the ideas. So you're not gonna, so when you watch the pieces, you'll go, oh yeah, I remember that, or oh yeah, they talked about that. So it will be more accessible and more relevant. And I'm all about making Shakespeare absolutely relevant, because it absolutely is. It really is the rap music of, you know, if you can listen to rap music, you can get Shakespeare, hands down. And that same playing, all rappers do is play with language. That's all Shakespeare was doing. The words in those plays, I mean, he made up so many words. Most of the people in the audiences didn't understand those words either. So the actor had to connect with them and say them in a way that the meaning of the word came through the saying of the text.
Yes.
You know?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I definitely.
Yeah, sorry. I'm thinking about I was in Greece in 2013. I was doing a workshop at the Greek Theater Festival, and I went to Epidaurus to see the National Greek Theater do Medea, and it was in the, you know, all-male company, in the mass, the whole thing, and it was in Greek, not ancient Greek, modern Greek. But the only word I knew in Greek was ohi, which is no. I have never understood a Medea as clearly. I have never experienced a Medea as deeply and profoundly as I did watching a play that I couldn't understand the language at all, because they did such a great job of using those sounds to create experience and event. I didn't need to know the specifics of what they were saying, and that doesn't mean that actors don't need to be specific in how they use language, but you don't have to necessarily understand the specifics of what each sound means versus the profoundness of how sound actually impacts us. We can tell the difference. It's interesting, if you listen to somebody laughing hysterically or crying hysterically, those can sound exactly the same, except there's a tiny little difference. And you hear that difference that changes the experience from, oh, that person's laughing to that person's crying. And it's the same thing with
yeah, and we know that instantly. Yeah, the intention, whether we understand the language or can make out, we know, oh, there's something alarming or something wonderful or anything.
It's human. Yeah, it's human. And if you live in any big city, you know this anyways, because you hear different languages all the time, and you can always tell when somebody's having a fight. You can always tell when somebody's being very amorous with somebody just by the tone and texture of the sounds of the words, not necessarily the specific things that are being said.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and I agree with your earlier point that Shakespeare is so much like rap music and hip hop, and just that aliveness that we get to experience at a rap show or a rap battle. Or, I mean, I don't go to many of these, so I'm probably saying the words wrong. But that sense of aliveness and wordplay, I think, yeah, absolutely, that's it. And
so nobody should be afraid of the language. I actually have a thing here in Ireland, because it is unfortunate that a lot of schooling here, especially for people that were my age and older, were done by either nuns or the British, and most of the lessons that the Irish got were, you don't know how to speak this language correctly, you're too stupid to understand it, and you're not. And so there's this kind of like, oh, well, we try to do Shakespeare, but we don't do it very well. And it's like the Irish are the rhythm of the language, the way that they use language and text, and how they just understand poetry instinctively. They can, they can pick up text and just read it, and it sounds so wonderful to the ear. So I worked very hard to say, and God, Shakespeare was a man of the people. He was the proletariat. He was not an elitist. It's why the Oxfordians go absolutely crazy about the fact that, he wasn't, of the upper classes. He wasn't. Yeah. He was a working class proletariat playwright who wrote for the people, about the people, and some of his best characters are the servants, the underclass. Yes. They have some of the best speech, some of the best language. Yes. So I bristle when students are told that, it has to be done a specific way, or that they won't understand it, or whatever. It's not that at all. If you understand rap music, if you can listen to rap music and go, oh yeah, isn't that cool how they did that with that word doesn't actually exist in the dictionary. And we do it with text, actually. We do it with text speech all the time. That's what text is. It's making up language, and it's just, and we use text exactly the way Shakespeare did, because all Shakespeare did was try to get meaning across. And when we use things like LOL and all of that, we're just trying to, in the most efficient way possible, get our meaning across. That's all Shakespeare was trying to do.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's a whole other conversation, and I would love that one, of the whole, like, the zip filing of words and thoughts into language or a meme or all of that. But yes, you also mentioned how, Shakespeare invented so many words, and we all kind of know that in an academic sense, but it's so wonderful to think you kind of opened it up that, no, the actor had to say this in front of people for the first time. And so there's an aliveness there of, is this even going to come across? Will this be accepted? Will it be understood? And to be the first person to say this word. And that just kind of, I think, opens up a lot of possibility for an actor in Shakespeare today.
And that they didn't have they didn't have a dictionary that said what it was, and neither did the audience. So there's also an agreement between the actor and the audience about meaning. We don't think about that as actors enough. That you have to be in agreement with the audience that what you're saying has meaning for them. Not for you, for them. And if you're not in agreement, if the audience is in agreement with you about what that meaning that you're making is, then you have to work harder to make that agreement clear to the audience. So,
Yes. Cool. So I think let's wrap it for now. I don't want to give away too much. So I'll kind of restate the time and place and how to tune in. But before we do that, are there any final thoughts you'd like to impart before we part?
I don't think so. I think, you know, if you're interested at all, tune in. I think it's probably going to be full of a lot of laughter, a lot of fun. You know, I'm pretty serious, but the women that are in this actually have really good senses of humor. I take this all really seriously, and they have really good senses of humor. So I think it'll be really fun. I think it'll be really interesting, and especially right now because theaters are closed, you know, and I'm not a big fan of like putting on plays on screens just to show people stuff. It's like, why not use this time to crack open that facade and let the audience backstage? That's essentially what we're doing. We're letting you into our process, and we're saying we're going to put the process out there for everybody to see. The process is fun. I actually enjoy the process more than the production. The process is actually fun. So that's what I would say. It's probably going to be a little bit more fun than people might think of. Oh, they're just going to sit around and talk about Shakespeare.
Right. Okay, so everyone, this is Stephanie Courtney, director of Are Our Souls Our Own? An exploration of Shakespeare's women. Tune in on January 17th. It will be 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. East Coast Standard Time. And does that make it 6 p.m. in Dublin? Okay, got it. 6 p.m. in Dublin.
Yeah.
So January 17th, 10 a.m., 1 p.m., or 6 p.m., depending on where you are in the world. We will post a link and we will be blasting this as well as some other sneak peeks in the week leading up to the show on this profile, SCSF_guild. Do follow Stephanie Courtney to keep up with the future projects that she is involved with after this one. And all of these handles and things will be in the description. And for YouTube, all of this will be in the description. Cool. Thank you, Stephanie, for your time.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Take care.
Bye-bye.